Hey guys, I was told I had to make a video on this because it was so awesome. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take you through, uh, basically we started with this and then we turned it into this. And this is the plucky stringed instrument that you're going to hear in this. And, it basically goes into this distorted electric guitar-y kind of sounding thing, but it's all audio manipulation. So I'm going to show you how. Take a listen. Cool. So yeah, it's awesome. I love it. It turned out even better than I expected. This is mostly unprocessed. So first, let me show you what's actually going on. So I've got this dry-wet chain, and it starts basically entirely dry. And so that's mostly just this untouched loop from, I think, Cashmere Volume 3 or something. But then we go in and on this, we're mixing in almost entirely, right? This says 123, but really we're mixing in basically it's entirely this effects chain, which consists of guitar rig. I based it off of a preset number 53 Clean Machine, and then I added this whole control room thing, and I think I swapped out the amp or added the amp entirely or something. I did a lot of altering of the preset basically, but I sort of dialed in this timbre. Which I liked it because it's like really harsh, but it also seemed distant at the same time. So I'm still, dialing it in. We're in the middle of this song. But then there's some medium curve saturation. That's kind of like my favorite. It gives like the nicest bite without seeming too harsh. And then this is interesting. I actually had EQ'd this one way, and then I decided what would it be like if I flipped this to -100. And it made it way awesomer, and like I don't know, like changed it entirely because it's like kind of like the opposite of what I wanted, but it gave it this really like wonky sound, which I loved. And this is just EQing to enhance that. This rack is a far away rack. It kind of makes things sound a little bit farther away, and so sometimes that's on. But let's get into the actual clip manipulation here. So you can see the transpose. I think +1 is the default to get it in key, but I'm moving around the transpose first off. So I'm taking these little slices, and sometimes I'm like copying them. Like you can see that these two are the same. So let's take a listen really quick. Yeah, so right, and then now that one sounds a little bit different because I'm doing a lot of transposition modulation, and that's like one of the biggest tricks to sort of get this to sound like awesome and organic. So even just these little bends, right? It's like sort of falls at the end. This is 2 semitones. Honestly, transposition automation is kind of easier than pitch bend and stuff when you're actually still working with MIDI. So I've got this in audio first, and then it's doing all these different things, right? So these different transpositions, right? I'm going to take you through some of the stuff I'm doing in the warp engine to get the timbres that I want. But all of these things are then hitting this effects chain, right? And so the distortion kind of cleans up a lot of like the weirdness of it, right? And so we can actually, listen to what this dry signal would sound like. For example, here, let's so let's. Right, so it's kind of like weird, and it's not really natural sounding, but once you hit like an amp with like any reasonable amount of distortion, like it changes everything, right? Like electric guitars, I don't know if you've ever seen like an electric guitar that's not plugged in and played it. They don't sound very good, right? Acoustic guitars sound way better, obviously, because they've got like this whole resonant thing and stuff. So this is a really sharp, plucky string sound, and it's not going to actually sound that good, especially pitched up. But it is going to make a really, really good carrier signal, or for all these effects, right? So if we re-enable automation, we can get back to mostly this guitar rig signal. Right, so most of that is actually this transposition automation. Right, so you can see this. And the other thing worth noting is I'm basically progressing mostly linearly through this loop, right? But I'm sometimes repeating things and sometimes taking better like plucks from earlier in it, but I'm more or less going forward in time through this loop, right? So I'm like working my way through this loop and chopping it up, and that sort of gives it a cohesion with the original loop, so it sounds like a variation of it as opposed to just something completely different, right? And so these little pitch bends really make all the difference in the world. And then the rest of it is really that effects chain. And just look at this. This is like pitch down 11, and look at these formants, right? So if I change these formants, that sounds completely different. Right, so what formants are is it's basically, you can think about it like EQ peaks or something, but it's like parts of the frequency spectrum that are getting emphasized, right? And so this is going to emphasize higher parts of the sound. This is going to emphasize lower parts of the sound. And so if you're formant shifting something, you'll find either that 0 works the best because it's like kind of the most true to the actual pitch shift. And so the formants are matching the pitch shifting. But in between, if you really pay attention and even like use shift up to like move this by tenths, right, as opposed to by 1, there's a lot of really, really nice timbres in there, right? And if you're really, really careful with the numbers you choose, I think this is like on like 65 point something. I'm just going to trust my ears that that's like what was awesomest for this line, right? So like I'm really like, this one I wanted like as screechy as possible, I think. And some of these, I'm also changing the envelope. That actually makes a big difference with sort of the texture of it. Like it'll make it sort of like more gritty because like, I'm not exactly sure how it works with the envelope of the sound, but like transients either don't get processed or they do get processed through like the formant shifting a little bit more or something like that. So anyway, a lot of these, I didn't like fine tune every single one of them, but like some of them I definitely did. And, the cooler lines in here definitely did. And so, that's the first thing I wanted to talk about. I also had, I had these slides down here. Here, let's just play this. Yeah, so this is just all, I had done this as one slide, and then you'll notice the transposition knobs are different on some of these, or maybe not there, but on the other time I did this, down here for sure. Yeah, the 5, right? So they're kind of like going around, right? Which is kind of cool. It's like all these like different little like mini drops. So there's that I wanted to show you. The other thing I wanted to talk about is like how I get like way darker all of a sudden compared to this version. So just take a listen. So there's two tricks I'm going to focus on. One, you can see this is just a half step, and I'm sort of like bending in a half step and then moving, and I'm sort of moving in this space between the root and this first, this half step. So from a music theory standpoint, using a half step right away, going from a 1 to a flat 2, is consistent with like Phrygian. So this song's basically in minor, or a Japanese Joshi scale, I think, which is basically like a minor pentatonic. It doesn't have a couple of the notes of minor, but it's all the same notes. But if you have a flat 2, all of a sudden it changes and it becomes what we call Phrygian in the Western scales, and there's some Japanese names for it I can't remember. But Phrygian's like darker than minor, and so especially when you play around with this little tiny space, right, between 1 and flat, or like your 1 and your flat 2, there's a lot of dissonance there, and it's all like being out of tune, quote unquote. But like, all right, like listen to that. Right, like this one's like doing a similar bend, like right around like the root. So it's like you're kind of like pulling out, and like, the flat 2 is what makes Phrygian. Right, without that, if you had a regular 2, you'd just be in regular minor. Right, so the quality of Phrygian is it's darker than minor. So if you really want to get dark, I recommend flat 2s, dude. It is the best. But yeah, to bend around there, it really provides a nice sense of dissonance. And so then I also, in this section, to bring that out, this is still a work in progress, but you can see this. Oh, this is frozen. That's why I can't click on anything. But these are flat 2. So we're in F sharp and it goes up to a G. In minor, normally you think about a G sharp as your 2. This is that flat 2. So I'm like going back and forth between this 1 and this flat 2, and that's really bringing in this dissonance. But then you can hear that. Yeah, the other thing is these little choppy guys here really make a big difference in terms of like sort of making it feel all janky and like stunted in like a really cool way. So. And then this is actually was there from when I pasted it in, but I'm like, oh, you know what? Like this was like a whole different note and stuff, but I'm like, I bet you that'll sound cool to do like some weird thing that just sort of existed, because I like copied this over from here. So that's like kind of like a harnessing happy accidents or chaos or like just random imperfections in the workflow or something that you're just like, no, I can totally use that. Right, so that's like kind of an efficiency thing. Right, and then like a lot of this, like the really wonky notes. Yeah, I think that I picked this because it's actually not even in key so much. Like this second note, because I'm just sort of transposing it, is like an out of key note, but I'm like, no, that totally works. Just because like I was going for this whole wonky dissonance thing. And you can see like the formants, like I just like, the thing is, it's really, you chop it and you sort of get the notes that you want and stuff, and then you improve the timbre of anything that doesn't like sound good. Because if after you've pitch shifted it and you're like bending it and stuff, and these formant knobs will then like change the timbre, you can get all these like wonky like sounds like through it that sort of like add to that effect, or you can make them extra clean and things like that. So that's pretty much what I did. I took this, I chopped it up, I rearranged things, repeated certain things. I pitch shifted them all over the place. Sometimes I go like up an octave, then down like 2 octaves from there, and like bounce back and forth and like bend one up really fast and one down like really fast and stuff like that. And just like really wrote it linearly, like from left to right, just like trying to make sure that it flowed and that it was awesome the whole time. And then any parts that weren't awesome, I just changed it and fixed it and made it better until it was awesome. And that's like part of the trick of music, it's just keep making things better until they stop sucking. And when nothing sucks, then it turns out everything's actually pretty good. All right, dudes, I hope this is helpful and inspiring. Yeah, take care. Peace.